Quote from Sally Yates. This is an op-ed that was in today's New York Times. Former acting attorney general issued this new warning. Let me quote her. The president is attempting to dismantle the rule of law, destroy the time-honored independence of the Justice Department, and undermine the career men and women who are devoted to seeking justice day in and day out, regardless of which political party is in power. If we are not careful, when we wake up from the Trump presidency, our justice system may be broken beyond recognition. Now, again, check the source. This is a woman who the president fired. Yes. So obviously she's critical. But we've also seen a number of Republican lawmakers this week openly critical. It was Lindsey Graham saying the bit about there will be holy hell, you know, if Sessions is fired in that White House. Is this a trend of more and more people, both left, right, and center, standing up to the White House?
Right. I do. I think the Sessions issue has inspired sort of bipartisan messages to the president that you can't do this. You can't fire Jeff Sessions, whose job it is to be independent. And you have Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, saying, Mr. President, if you fire Sessions, we don't have time to schedule a hearing on his replacement. How about that one? So there, you know, Republicans who, by the way, like Jeff Sessions because he is conservative, and there are Democrats who don't like Jeff Sessions but believe in the independence of the Justice Department, who say, this is a non-starter, Mr. President. Be careful. Think about this, because it will have repercussions for you.
Gloria, thank you as always.
Sure.
Thank you. Today, after Congress passed a new sanctions bill against Moscow, a bill that is right now sitting on the president's desk. Vladimir Putin taking control of several U.S. diplomatic properties and ordering many U.S. diplomats and staff out of the country. But here's the question. Will President Trump sign this bill that cracks down on Russia for meddling in last year's election? The White House has been reluctant, saying it'll hurt the president's chances to cooperate with Russia. Ben Judah, author of Fragile Empire, How Russia Fell in and Out of Love with Vladimir Putin, is back with us today. Ben Judah, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Let me just begin with the retaliation. Can you explain the significance of these moves, these sudden moves by the Kremlin?
The Kremlin's classic playbook is mirroring retaliation. Any sanctions that the United States puts on Russia, it wants to be able to mirror them to show that it too is a superpower that can bite at what matters to the United States. The problem for Russia is that whilst Russian money and Russian kleptocrats and Russian banks have lots of reasons and lots of interest in the United States, there isn't so much that the US has in Russia that makes it vulnerable to leverage. So what Putin has done is try and hit on US diplomats and US diplomatic services here. Is it comparable to the effects of these sanctions hitting banks, these sanctions hitting really the funding networks of Russian kleptocrats? Not really.
But if the president goes on and signs this bill, how will Vladimir Putin react to that?
What it will mean if the president goes on to sign this bill is that hopes of a reset, hopes of a deal between Trump and Putin are dead. Because the core of this has always been Putin trying to lift sanctions. Why is Putin so desperate to lift sanctions? That's because Russia is a kleptocracy. It's a partnership between Putin and corrupt, plundering officials and oligarchs that take their money out of Russia and put it abroad, put it in banks that launder it through the West. And what these sanctions have done is limit and freeze a lot of their financial flows. So he's desperate to lift them because it harms his partnership with the people around him. Now, this bill, if passed, cements those sanctions. And it means that what Russia's meddling would have given it over the last election cycle in the US is really very little, and it will be fitting in with what I see as a historical pattern of Russian overextension, of overplaying its hand that we see in the 19th century and we see in actions that precipitated the Cold War.
Well, it's a piece of legislation that is waiting for the president's autograph that had so much support within Congress, it is veto-proof. Ben Judah, we'll see what the fallout is either way. Thank you so much. We'll see you again. Coming up next, if your head isn't entirely spinning from this crazy week in Washington, you have not been paying close enough attention. We'll discuss where the Trump administration goes from here.
I got the facts. My doctor.
Watching CNN to the continuing chaos within the White House. To be a fly on the wall during the flight the president just took to Long Island here in New York, because on this very plane was Anthony Scaramucci, the White House communications director, and the chief of staff, Reince Priebus, as this whole rivalry has taken a new ugly turn. The New Yorker, if you have not read this, start reading it now. Just released this vulgarity-laced interview Scaramucci gave to his correspondent Ryan Lizza. Scaramucci called Priebus a paranoid schizophrenic and used R-rated insults against chief strategist Steve Bannon. The mooch, as he refers to himself, later tweeted this, quote, "I sometimes use colorful language. I will refrain in this arena, but not give up the passionate fight for Donald Trump's agenda." Sarah Murray is at the White House for us today. Sarah, any word on the flight and how these two managed that?
Oh, Brooke, wouldn't you have loved to be on the plane with the two of them? This is not the large Air Force One. This is the smaller Air Force One. So, you know, not that many places to escape from one another. We have not heard exactly how that flight went. They did not seem to want to comment, apparently, as they deplaned when they were arriving in New York. But look, I think it's so striking that you have had this public feud. You've had Anthony Scaramucci say these horrific things about the chief of staff and the chief strategist. What we have not heard is President Trump come to the defense of his chief of staff. Now, of course, a lot of tongues have been wagging over these last couple of days, and there have always been rumors that Reince Priebus could soon be out the door here at the White House. And those rumors are starting once again, wondering what is the fate of a chief of staff if he's, you know, allowing someone like the White House communications director to say these things about him. No defense from the president. Now, allies to Priebus insist he's not stepping down, he's not resigning, he's staying here. His position is safe. They point to the fact that he accompanied the president to New York as an indication of that. But it just sort of gives you a sense of how dysfunction continues to reign in this White House. And it's not like this is happening while the president's priorities are being executed upon side by side. We saw this health care bill go down in a week when there has been kind of epic backbiting here in the West Wing. And it sort of makes you wonder how long all of this can continue with all of these gentlemen working together under the same roof. Brooke?
No comment on the smaller plane, and certainly that also means no public apology either. Sarah Murray, I know you're watching for it. Thank you so much at the White House. And, you know, listen, if this is like the Game of Thrones over there, we'll talk live with the former deputy chief of staff at the White House and a campaign chief who can explain why the leaks here will not stop. Conflict seems to be consuming the Trump White House. Not only is the new White House communications director picking a fight with the president's chief of staff, as this photo from the Wall Street Journal seems to perfectly sum up their chilly relationship, but the list of White House officials at odds with the president himself is growing. The Trump feuds now include, we have photos for you, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, his Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, his acting FBI Director, Andy McCabe, and his Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Oh, and his National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. With me now, Alex Conant, a former spokesman for the Republican National Committee in the White House and the former communications director for Marco Rubio's presidential campaign, and Hinson Moore, who served as Deputy Chief of Staff for George H.W. Bush and was a former Louisiana congressman. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, to you first. And I know you wrote all about leaks, but I just have to ask, just talking to Sarah Murray over at the White House on all things Scaramucci, and better not to comment. Do you think this is a guy who's going to apologize?
I mean, obviously he should apologize. Look, I don't understand how he can get on an airplane with Reince Priebus, let alone look him in the eye after those comments were printed, and he hasn't apologized for them. To me, that I don't know how you move forward without acknowledging that those comments were totally inappropriate and that the chief of staff is owed an apology. I mean, obviously there are much deeper issues at play here, but just as a man, I would think that he'd want to apologize to Reince Priebus for it.
Mr. Moore, you served as Deputy Chief of Staff under Bush 41, and by now we're familiar with this colorful language that Scaramucci used in this New Yorker interview. Maybe we've never seen a communications director use this kind of language publicly, but it's my understanding you say every White House has tensions like this.
Yeah, there's really no news in the fact that you have people unhappy in the White House, and some that even go so far as to leak information from the White House. It's not good. It ought to be controlled. It undermines the ability of a president to get his job done. But it happens. And what people on the White House staff tend to forget is they're not there because they're the smartest people in the world. They're there to help a president. And they should be thinking about the president and what's good for the president every day. And when they start leaking or they start squabbles within the White House, they're obviously following an agenda other than that, in my opinion.
Hopefully they're pretty smart, too, if this is the White House. But we know in this interview with Scaramucci, Alex, he said it was the leaks coming out of the White House and the intel community that really irked him the most. And he says, maybe I'll just fire them all. He's working hard to end the leaks. But, in a sense, you want to say, welcome to Washington, sir. I mean, is that even a possibility?
Yeah, so I wrote a piece in Politico today, actually, about this very issue. He can't just fire everybody and expect the leaks will stop. Because, look, all political organizations leak to a certain degree. The ones that leak the most do so because they lack unity, they lack loyalty, and they lack less self-discipline. And clearly this White House lacks all three of them. And frankly, it's because of the president's own behavior. He has not given his White House team a unifying principle beyond just defending his own reputation. He clearly doesn't inspire loyalty in people because loyalty is a two-way street. When the way he's treated Reince Priebus and his attorney general does not instill loyalty in others. And finally, it's no secret that the president himself often has off-the-record conversations with reporters where he says more than he should. If the president himself is leaking to reporters as he does, then it's hard to expect his staff not to follow his example.
Let's just, let's get some perspective of previous White Houses and how this worked. I mean, Hinton, it's my understanding you have some pretty great stories on how, President Bush and how he dealt with leaks within his own White House. How did Bush Sr. keep this under wraps?
Well, basically, the first thing is the staff has to realize they're not serving the president well. Secondly, my experience was to see a very strong chief of staff. And I'm not commenting on the current one. I'm simply saying the one I saw work internally in Jim Baker. He had the complete support of the president. He and the president were very close friends. Therefore, President Bush could turn over the total running of the White House to Jim Baker. Jim Baker, in turn, very carefully controlled the staff. You only knew what you needed to know to get your job done. There were just a handful, a small group of people around Jim Baker that knew everything that was going on. Therefore, if there was any kind of leak or any kind of trouble, Jim Baker knew exactly where it came from. Consequently, there wasn't any. He actually brought order and he brought discipline to a White House that needed it at a time in 1992 when things were pretty tough for President Bush. I think that Donald Trump, the President Trump's in the same place now. He's having a hard time getting his administration running smoothly, partly because this is new to him. It seems to be new to a lot of the people around him in the White House. And some discipline needs to be brought. And it needs to be run differently.
What would that be? If I may just jump in, what advice? What would that discipline look like? What advice would you have for this current White House?
Well, I think that President Trump needs to sit down and figure out who's really close to him. And he's got to give them, that person, the power to really run the White House. And then he needs to also agree that only a few people need to be brought in on everything. And therefore, you limit the amount of people involved in something, and you therefore limit the ability for any kind of meaningful leak to the press. And that's one way you get it done, and that's the way I saw it done.
Mr. President, are you watching? Are you watching? Yeah. Alex, quickly, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I largely agree with what he just said. You need to have one person who's in charge. You can't have a communications director who reports directly to the president and a chief of staff. You need to have clear chains of command. Otherwise, you're going to have all sorts of factions forming, and they're going to leak against each other, as we've seen, and the infighting will continue.
Alex Conant and Hinton Moore, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
President Trump facing a huge decision about whether to sign a new Russia sanctions bill. But as he decides, Russia today is retaliating. Hear what Vladimir Putin did to the U.S. diplomats and properties.
CNN breaking news.
We continue on. You're watching CNN on this Friday afternoon. I'm Brooke Baldwin. We have more now on the stunning defeat of the Republicans' effort to repeal Obamacare. Moments ago, President Trump going off script, sounding off against Congress.
They should have approved health care last night, but you can't have everything. Boy, oh boy. They've been working on that one for 7 years. Can you believe that? The swamp. But we'll get it done. We're going to get it done. You know, I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode and then do it. I turned out to be right. Let Obamacare implode.
Let Obamacare implode, he says. In the end, it was just 19 seconds that dashed those 7 years of hope. After debating into the wee hours of the morning, it was Senator John McCain right there who shocked a lot of his colleagues on the Republican side, casting the third no vote, giving the dramatic thumbs down on the Senate floor. There you go. Joining me more to talk about this and what happens next for health care in this country, Jake Tapper, host of State of the Union and The Lead. Jake Tapper, what do you make of the president, first off, just there in Long Island, you know, saying let Obamacare implode?
Well, I mean, as a policy, it's not really optimal. I mean, Obamacare is failing in several parts of the country, with premiums going up, with very few options, with health insurance plans withdrawing from the exchanges. And the idea of letting it implode means millions of Americans continuing to have skyrocketing premiums or have very few, if any, options when it comes to health care. It means let Americans suffer. So it's not really a policy prescription in any sense.
On healthcare, we just played the moment, the thumbs down with Senator McCain. I mean, there's so many storylines. You know, President Obama's former opponent saving Obama's signature piece of legislation, or coming back from cancer diagnosis to cast this deciding vote, or the senator who hasn't seen eye to eye with President Trump delivering a major blow to his agenda 2 years and a week from, you know, Donald Trump saying he wasn't a hero. You know, whatever it is, did it seem that Senator McCain took one for the team, defending other senators who've been vulnerable for voting yes? How do you see that?
From talking to people around McCain, it really comes down to the idea of his lack of confidence in the process and the fact that there was this possibility out there that so-called skinny repeal, which was ultimately what the Republicans were voting for, except for 3 of them, and the Democrats were voting against. Skinny repeal, that's banning any federal dollars going to Planned Parenthood, the repeal of the individual mandate, the repeal of the employer mandate, and also the removal of the medical device tax. The fear that would actually become the health care law. That was what McCain was concerned about. Obviously, we know all the back and forth. The Republicans in the House passed their bill. Republicans in the Senate couldn't come up with one. The pitch was to Republicans, just pass skinny repeal, and then we'll have a conference committee where Republicans in the House and Senate will sit down and actually write legislation. But Speaker Paul Ryan would not really guarantee, and could not really guarantee, that skinny repeal wouldn't just be passed by the House and then signed by President Trump and become law. And that was what McCain was really worried about. Conference committee, he was afraid that it was going to be a trap, that ultimately House Republicans were just going to pass skinny repeal. President Trump would sign it into law. They would be able to check the box. We repealed Obamacare. We did this successful thing. And then ultimately, it was lousy legislation. So that's why he voted the way he did.
So that's the why on Senator McCain. But what about the other 2 no's? You had 2 ladies, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski also knows as well. Just wanted to mention that. And between this, Jake, and then the Russian sanctions bill and the defense of the AG, Jeff Sessions, it seems like more and more Republican lawmakers are starting to stand up to the president, stand up to the White House.
Yeah, it's not as surprising from Collins and Murkowski, who have been more mavericky than even John McCain in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to health care legislation. Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski have been expressing a lot of concerns about original drafts of the bill that took away funding for Medicaid the health program, the government health program for poorer people and for disabled people. They expressed concern about not allowing women to spend their Medicaid dollars to get checkups or birth control at Planned Parenthood. There were a lot of things that they were upset about. What's more surprising is when you see Dick Shelby, the Republican of Alabama, or Chuck Grassley, the Republican of Iowa, who's chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, those gentlemen saying things to the White House like, I'm not going to confirm another attorney general. That's not what the Judiciary Committee's doing. Or their deep offense that they've taken at the way President Trump has been treating Attorney General Sessions, who of course is a former colleague of theirs. Right. That's where you see a lot of these Republicans starting to stand up. And then, of course, very significantly is this Russia sanctions bill, which passed the House and Senate overwhelmingly with veto-proof majorities, and then some, even though the White House has been lobbying against it. There are some real there's a real lack of confidence being expressed in what President Trump's doing in any number of these incidents that I just mentioned.
Thus, the more and more people standing up against him. Jake Tapper, thank you so much for all of that. We'll see you, as we always do, on the lead at the top of the hour. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Let's talk North Korea now. The Pentagon is telling CNN that Pyongyang has fired another ballistic long-range missile. This one up in the air for about 45 minutes, about 8 minutes longer than the last. Landed just about 80 miles off the coast of Japan. Kim Jong-un has now launched a dozen missiles this year. And this comes as fears grow about progress toward developing a nuclear weapon. CNN's Will Ripley is live in Beijing. He has spent a lot of time inside of North Korea. And Jamie Metzel is here with me, a former staff member on the National Security Council and a senior fellow on the Atlantic Council. And he's also just back from China, where he held meetings about the future of North Korea. So, Will Ripley, just first to you, tell me more about the trajectory of this ICBM.
South Korea is saying, Brooke, that this is more advanced than the ICBM that was launched on the 4th of July. Its highest altitude was 3,700 kilometers, around 2,300 miles. It traveled a distance of about 1,000 kilometers, landing within 100 nautical miles of Japan in those waters known as the exclusive economic zone. This trajectory is significant because they launched it really high and then it kind of went over and went down like this. But had it been launched at a normal trajectory, it could have put much of the United States within striking range. We're talking about cities as far away as Denver, maybe even Chicago. And of course, the analysts have been saying now at the State Department that by early next year, so a matter of months from now, North Korea could have a reliable ICBM, so a missile that they could launch at any moment that could carry a nuclear warhead to the mainland U.S. with pretty decent accuracy. That's very frightening for people who are watching North Korea and weren't even predicting this rapid of a pace of development even as recently as 6 months ago, Brooke.
That's Jamie. Good to see you.
Hello.
That is when people's ears start to perk, though, when they hear cities like Denver and Seattle thrown in the mix. First, just your response to, again, yet another ICBM test, but also the fact that it went higher, it was up in the air longer, which, if you change the arithmetic around, it can go much farther out.
Yeah. So it's very, very clear. North Korea's goal in this is to develop a deliverable nuclear weapons capability capable of hitting anywhere in the United States, and frankly, that means anywhere in the world. So each one of these incremental steps is an increase, but the core problem is the same today as it was yesterday, which is that North Korea has an advanced missiles program, an advanced nuclear weapons program, and that's all going to come together into more and more and greater precision in their ability to deliver these deadly payloads. And that leads us again to this same situation about what needs to be done. The Trump administration policy has been a total tatters. There's no known policy. The United States has weakened its critical alliances with South Korea and Japan. It's undermined its leverage with China.
But what about China? I mean, you were just there.
Yeah, I was just there, and I was speaking to top Chinese leaders.
Say?
And what they were saying was, well, this is your problem. The United States needs to do more.
Check the geography.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying to them, because North Korean nuclear weapons, the United States will continue to do more of what we have been doing, which is try, in spite of the problems we're having under this administration, to strengthen and shore up our alliances, rebalancing of military assets, building of our strategic missile defense capabilities. All of those things weaken China. And if North Korea further develop its nuclear weapons, there's going to be a lot of pressure, as there is now, on South Korea and then possibly Japan to develop their nuclear weapons. And that makes that environment much more complicated. And so the Chinese really need to step up in a much bigger way than they have so far.
All of this is the U.S. has shortened our own timetable and calendar of when we think they'll be nuclear capable. That said, we wait for more fallout and the response from President Trump. Thank you so much, Jamie, for coming by. I appreciate it. And Will Ripley, for all your trips to North Korea, we thank you as well. Ahead here, two of the people closest to the president in this feud. We have new reporting today about the fate of the chief of staff, Reince Priebus, and the vulgar attack he received from the new guy at the White House. Plus, Russia retaliating as Congress sends a new sanctions bill to the president's desk. The key question, this is what Jake Tapper was alluding to, will he sign it? And from the Boy Scout speech to the president declaring himself as the most presidential president ever, let's take a look back at the week that was, a week that might have been his wildest yet. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. New fallout today after Senator John McCain helped bring his party's health care bill down in the U.S. Senate. After debating into the early hours of the morning, Senator McCain shocked his Republican colleagues by casting a third no vote that decided the outcome. You had Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who also voted no in a huge setback for the party's 7-year promise to the American people to repeal Obamacare. But let's take a closer look at McCain's moment specifically. The Arizona senator and veteran and POW, not present on the floor when his name was called. CNN would later learn he actually stepped out of the chamber to take a phone call from President Trump. And because votes are cast alphabetically, Senator McCain returned to the chamber as the clerk had reached Senator Gary Peters. And what happens in the next few seconds made history. Watch. 1:29 a.m. Senator McCain re-enters the chamber. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stands at the front of the room like he had most of the night. The grin on his face, though, quickly disappears.
Mr. Peters.
Senator Bernie Sanders appears to nudge Senator Jeanne Shaheen as if to say, "Watch this." McCain waves his hand to get the attention of the Senate clerk, pauses for just a moment, and gives a dramatic thumbs down. An audible gasp on the Senate floor, and then commotion. Some Democrats can't contain their excitement. Senator Elizabeth Warren leans in to get a better look and breaks into applause. Senator Dianne Feinstein, a single assertive clap. Senator Sherrod Brown slams his hand on the desk in affirmation, while some Republicans, like Senator Marco Rubio, stare in disbelief. Senator Bill Cassidy drops his head. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer turns and waves his arms, apparently trying to quiet them, as Senator John McCain turns around and walks back to his chamber desk all alone.
Mr. Reed.
CNN political commentator Ana Navarro is with me, a dear friend and former colleague of Senator McCain's. And so, Ana Navarro, I know you had been in touch with him last week. You've been texting back and forth with the senator. Tell me has he shared anything with you about the big thumbs down moment?
No, I haven't spoken to him since then. But, you know, anybody who knows John McCain well would not be terribly surprised by this. The guy has been signaling this all along. Brooke, he has been so mad about the process surrounding this health care bill for months, and he's been vocal about it. It's not like he's been saying it under bated breath and he's been saying it in closed rooms. He's been saying it in public. I think that speech he gave earlier in the week signaled
scolding his own party,
strongly, saying we need to go back to regular order. We need to have hearings. We need to allow amendments. I am a no vote in this shell of a bill. Well, none of the things that he laid out were done. In fact, this thing was rammed through, which is precisely what he said he would not vote for. He said he would listen to the governor of his state, who was not supportive of this bill. And so nothing that he laid out in that speech earlier in the week happened. And I don't know. What did Republicans think? That this guy had delayed his treatment by a week, flown to Washington against doctors' orders to be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell? That's not who John McCain is. And I also think he understood the significance of his one vote.
You know, he provided the drama and is, you know, well deserved of the spotlight on him. But let's please also point out the two other women here. You had Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. They had already made up their minds. They were clear from the get-go during the different iterations of the potential votes before. In fact, we actually have a photo. Can we pop the photo up, guys, from Senator Collins as she was going to Bangor, Maine, where she was greeted in the airport. Look at this. People on their feet, you know, standing ovation there in Maine on her no vote. Do you feel, I mean, these women also deserve their due in terms of, depending on how you see this, you know, their credit for standing up against what the president wanted?
Look, I think all three deserve a lot of credit for doing what we should hope every elected official does, which is stand up for their constituents' rights, for their constituents' interests, stand up on principle and conviction, not political factors, not political pressure, and stand up against the bullying. I love this Lisa Murkowski story. I mean, do you understand that the President of the United States got his Secretary of the Interior to call her on the phone and try to put pressure on her and bully her? And she responded to him, "Sweetheart, let me remind you, I fund your department and you're not bullying me." So I actually think that's another thing that could have influenced John McCain. I don't know anybody who is just more old-fashioned chivalrous than John McCain. And the idea that this guy tried to do that to Lisa Murkowski has got to have been infuriating. And frankly, it should have been infuriating to any senator, Republican or Democrat, because as John McCain said earlier in the week, they are a co-equal branch, not subservient to the president. I think Donald Trump overplayed his hand in trying to bully Lisa Murkowski and trying to exert pressure on some of these senators. And he just learned that there are some people, there are some politicians who have a steel spine and do not cower under pressure.
Ana Navarro, thank you so much. We'll see what's up next, how tax reform goes. Maybe a bit better for the Republicans. We shall see. Let's move on. The bitter tensions between two of President Trump's top aides getting uglier. Just a short time ago, we know that both the new White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci, with his vulgarity-laced interview with the New Yorker's Ryan Lizza. In it, Scaramucci called Priebus a paranoid schizophrenic and used, we'll call it NC-17, rated insults against Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. That's appropriate, right, ladies? NC-17? Let's get more perspective on Scaramucci and Priebus from two people who know them. CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel is with us, and Lynette Lopez, senior finance correspondent for Business Insider, who has covered Scaramucci for the last 5 years. Nice to have both of you ladies with me. And Lynette, if I may, let me just begin with you. You call him the mooch straight to his face.
Everyone calls him the mooch to his face. Anybody who's ever been in Vegas with him at the SALT conference, which was, you know, has been a fun party in the past. It was a little darker this year because of the uncertainty of Mooch's position. And there was, my piece on Business Insider was everybody kept making the same sound. It was constantly nervous laughter. Every time the Mooch would mention Trump, the bankers and the investors in the room just kind of were like, because the market is kind of weird right now. There's total uncertainty about policy. And at that time, there was uncertainty about how the role that Mooch was going to play. He still hasn't sold the firm. Well, listen, he wasn't even supposed to be there. So
he loves the president. He made that abundantly clear from the podium a week ago today. My question, though, is on language. If I were to use the four-letter words that this man, as the White House chief comms guy, used, I don't think I'd be sitting here today, and I don't think any of us would.
You'd
in
have
corporate
great
America.
Ratings for one day, and then
it'd be
done.
Like deuces.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this just how he speaks?
Yeah, this is Mooch. I mean, Mooch is. He's colorful. Yeah, this is Anthony. He's colorful. He's loud. He's flamboyant. He can be charming. He can be transactional. He can be effusive. He can be funny. He can be not funny. He can be serious as a heart attack.
But
he can
as
get mad at you.
successful as he is,
yes.
to me, it's about discipline and knowing that you are speaking on the record to Ryan Lizza, the New Yorker correspondent there in Washington, to be using this language and speaking like this.
Does he think the president likes it? I think that's the question.
What
I think
about
he
the
thinks,
country?
I don't think he cares about the country right now. Well, he cares in his own way. He cares about pleasing his boss, the president. That's how he knows he's going to win this Game of Thrones right now. If you make Donald Trump happy and you show him that you have the sharpest elbows in the room and that you can beat out Reince and you can beat out Steve Bannon, or at least quiet all your enemies, that's the kind of drive Donald Trump wants to see. And that's what Anthony Scaramucci can bring to this team. He is no holds barred fighter.
But it's making every other Republican in town crazy, because what's his title?
Exactly.
Communications director.
Yeah.
This is not good. As far as every Republican I've spoken to says, it makes them very nervous. And someone said to me, sarcastically said, oh, we know every rollout is going to be very smooth now. I mean, the party is worried about substance, about getting things done. If this is the package, if this is the way it's going out, this is not a good thing.
On Reince Priebus, because this is sad that I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, Jamie Gangel's interview with Reince Priebus from last year. I mean, it was just that good. Yeah. And as we're talking so much about Scaramucci and Reince Priebus, let me just air a little bit of your interview with him. This is before I think the president was even nominated. Right. So we're taking you back in time, and then we'll talk on the other side. Watch this.
You have to accept the fact that there's 1,000 opinions. I mean, so I'm so used to it that I don't even care. It doesn't bother me.
You're not pulling out your hair.
No, I'm not. People assume, oh, you must be miserable. You got a horrible job. But I don't see it that way. I'm not, that's what I'm saying. I'm not pouring Baileys in my cereal. I'm not sitting here trying to find the Johnny Walker. I mean, this is fun.
Is it Bailey's and his Fruit Loops now, Jamie?
I think it's Bailey's. I think it's Johnny Walker. I think he's pulling out his hair.
Sounds great.
I don't think he's having fun, is the bottom line. Just to put this in some context, we're only 6 months in.
Right.
This is not the first go-round where Reince Priebus is out and there are all of these rumors that he's not long for this job. And his allies are pushing back, saying he's not going anywhere. That said, the level of the rumors, the dysfunction, the push is certainly different this week than we've ever heard before. But let's not forget, he serves at the pleasure of one person, that's Donald Trump, and that's when we'll know if he's in the job or if he's out.
Yeah. Ladies, thank you so much.
No problem.
Not enough time. Let's talk more Scaramucci, the mooch, next week.
Anytime you want.
Speaking on Long Island, a place where, according to FBI, 20 people have been killed by this violent gang just in the last 2 years. Dan Lieberman, our CNN digital correspondent, has been speaking to some of these MS-13 gang members, has been in Long Island, and he's with me here now as we're watching, the president say goodbye to the crowd on Long Island. You've talked to them, and you have the president's words, but then the gang, as a result, feels emboldened.
That's
Why?
right. Yeah, I mean, for the last couple months, we were speaking with gang members from MS-13 and victims of the gang and immigrants on Long Island. And they say that Trump policies and rhetoric are actually helping the gang, emboldening the gang. Here, actually, we have a clip of part of the story. 2 gang members spoke to us. Take a listen.
Because what Trump is saying that all the Hispanics are bad and everything, so like whatever happens to them, they'd rather stay quiet and let it happen.
This gives them the opportunity to tell immigrants, what are you going to do? Are you going to report us? Look, they're deporting other innocent people. They're going to accuse you. They're going to associate you with us.
And police, immigrants are saying that they don't want to go to the police, that they're too afraid of deportation. They're afraid of talking. So they say,
the police are saying to them, we'll give you a free pass even if you're undocumented. If you're giving us a tip about MS-13, we won't arrest you.
Exactly. We spoke with one mother of an MS-13 victim, and she's afraid. She says that, they're looking at all their children as potential gang members. And if they're arrested on suspicion of being a gang member, they could be deported. So they say, the people that we spoke to say this is actually gaining strength for the gang. They're recruiting more members, and it's getting worse.
Dan has this entire piece on CNN.com right now on the main page. Go check it out, where you really get in depth with a lot of these people on Long Island. Thank you so much for swinging by. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Also developing right now on that very trip to Long Island, you have two of the president's top aides who are feuding in a fight that is getting nastier and nastier. We'll talk with someone who has covered the White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, for years and can talk all about, well, how he talks and how driven he is and what he thinks of this relationship with Reince Priebus. Also, we'll take a look at the dramatic moments, a frame-by-frame analysis at Senator John McCain's vote that ultimately sunk Republican efforts to repeal Obamacare. See the reactions from Democrats and Republicans in the Senate chamber. We'll be right back.
You're looking at live pictures right now. Air Force One on the ground in Long Island, over at the Long Island MacArthur Airport. The president and the entire team they're aboard Air Force One. They have not yet deplaned. They will be shortly. The president getting ready shortly also deliver the speech in front of law enforcement officials and others dealing with the wave of gang violence here in the United States. We're going to have live coverage of that speech as soon as it happens. First, he's got to get off the plane and then drive over to Brentwood, not too far away, where he'll be delivering that speech out on Long Island. In the meantime, there's other news we're watching, including this. This is a picture. It's worth 1,000 words. If this one, it's one of the new White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, and the White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus, icily glaring in the other's direction. Inside the Oval Office, it sort of screams some turmoil that's going on right now, Scaramucci's own words do, at least in a new and rather vulgar, profanity-laden interview with the New Yorker magazine, our own Ryan Lizza. Scaramucci absolutely unloads on his own, on his fellow White House staffers, and in the X-rated remarks, I should say, Scaramucci begins by threatening to fire the entire White House communications department. He then devolves into calling Reince Priebus a paranoid schizophrenic. He has even a lot more profane words in his descriptions of the chief strategist at the White House, Steve Bannon. Later, Scaramucci said he wanted to, quote, kill all the leakers in the White House. Joining us now, our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, our senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson, and our CNN political director, David Chalian. And we're going to keep a watch on the Air Force One and the president as he deplanes, as we discuss. So what's going on over there at the White House?
Wolf, that is a very good question to which we do not know the answer, except that there is, I would say it's beyond.
Moves him that